Tremendous honor and privilege to introduce our keynote speaker for today. And that is, of course, Leymah Gbowee, who at this point needs no introduction. She, of course, as I've mentioned already this morning, is one of the Nobel Prize winners in peace this year. So I'd like you all to give a very warm welcome to Leymah Gbowee. So not only does she need no introduction, but to the extent that she does, I don't have to do it because we have another distinguished guest on hand, and that is the great, and I actually might say iconic journalist, editor, and author, Sir Harold Evans, who is going to, he says grill, I will say engage in conversation, Ms. Gbowee. To talk about her ideas and the amazing work she has done in promoting peace and on behalf of women in Liberia and indeed around the world. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Here we go. Okay. Here we go. Have a seat.
Thank you, sir.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. I'm standing in for my wife, and I apologize for that. She cracked a rib in London, sat on a chair, which collapsed, and so she's in great pain. But I well remember my first encounter with Leymah was at a Daily Beast Women in the World conference. And I like to be on the front row on these occasions. And next to me was Valerie Jarrett, President Obama's counsel, assistant, whatever. And you made a speech of such devastating force and clarity, the whole audience erupted. This is 2 years ago. And immediately Valerie Jarrett got on the phone to the White House to speak to Michelle Obama to say one of Leymah's ideas should be followed, which is a conference of African leaders in Washington. But now today, of course, my wife's enthusiasm for you has been actually verified by the Norwegians. So it must be true. And I've just this morning finished reading this fantastic book that she's written. It's so exciting, both exciting, appalling, totally appalling, and inspiring. And so I'd like to begin actually just by asking us to look at a video, not yet, just when I give the word. She changed the course of history in her country by bringing together the most diverse ethnic, tribal groups, Christian and Muslim. And how she did it is an amazing story. And I think there's one particular moment in that movement that to me speaks exactly what this conference is about, which is how do you create a movement? How do you create a community when you've got people who are killing each other, raping, betraying, living in poverty, no idea whether when you go out in the morning you're going to be shot or starve. So let's just roll the video for a minute of a speech to Charles Taylor, who came in from over the border to disturb the existing order, which you described so beautifully, of what it was like before the turmoil started. It's a beautiful picture of an African village, African town. So can we roll the tape?
We ask the Honorable President of the Senate, being a woman and being in line with our cause, to kindly present this statement to His Excellency, Dr. Charles Taylor, with this message that the women of Nigeria, including the IDP, we are tired of war. We are tired running. We are tired begging for poverty. We are tired of our children being raped. We are now taking this stand to secure the future of our children because we believe as custodians of society tomorrow, our children will ask us, Mama, what was your role during the crisis? Kindly convey this to the President of Liberia. Thank you.
Now, that's Leymah in the middle of a civil war, and she's confronting Charles Taylor, who is now on trial in The Hague for his war crimes. I mean, you must have been, weren't you terrified?
Nope.
But here's a very... How did you get together to be in that position? How was it that women dressed in white as a mark of protest, and you were nominated to give this amazing petition in front of the dictatorial president?
Thank you, and thank you all for having me. I am still in the clouds, and this is my first public event as a laureate. So, and it's really an honor for me being here. It was on my schedule, and I've been saying to people what has been on my schedule before the Nobel Prize remains on my schedule. Back to your question. When we gathered together as women to protest the war, this was 14 years of war. I was 17 when the war started. At that point, I was 31. You get immune to fear. Because the first day I woke up to the sound of shooting, I was terrified. 6 months later, I was still terrified. A year later, I started getting used to it. 14 years later, there's nothing to be afraid of. You've seen women being killed, you've seen women get raped, you've seen dogs eat the flesh of human beings, you've gone hungry. So if fear was a thick layer, every day you lived through war, that layer was sliced a bit at a time. And by 14 years, there was nothing to slice out again. When we went to present the petition, after we started the protest, the women decided, you are the leader. And I was like, no.
But you were only 18 or 19 by then. What were you then?
I was, at that time, we had come to 14 years, so I was like 31.
Okay.
But when they said, you are the leader, I said, no. What I want to do is to just sit down, write your opinions, help to design strategies. And they were like, no, you are the leader. So when we went to speak with Taylor, they had gotten to know me because we had been protesting for several weeks now. And they knew that sometimes my mouth would get the best of me. So they prepared that statement, and all morning they warned me, read the statement. Don't read anything, don't say anything. But when we met Taylor, just looking at that man sitting there with his dark glasses and looking down and seeing thousands of women who didn't even know what the next minute held for them, I felt the statement was too sterile. It was too decent for him. He needed to hear the truth. So after I read the statement, in presenting that statement, what you heard me say was a part of the anger that I was feeling at the moment. I kept saying to myself, if I don't speak the truth now, this man will never feel or know how we are feeling. Mr. President, we are exhausted.
You are what?
We are tired. We're tired being raped. We're tired begging for food. We're tired. And I think if he really analyzed that statement, what I was saying in essence, we're fed up with your war.
Wonderful. Let me ask you, it's quite amazing. This whole movement in which you were involved and you were asked to take the leadership position was before Twitter, before Facebook, in a society which is totally divided among itself. How did you come together? I mean, if you were starting this movement today, and God forbid you never need to do this again, how did you go about it? You couldn't walk from village to village. How did you do it?
You know, it is amazing because when we started in Monrovia, in a matter of months, our movement had spread to 9 of Liberia's 15 counties. And we're talking hours away. When we started, the way we were able to mobilize women every day, those who had cell phones would call. But where there were no cell phones, people went and we used word of mouth.
With the church is important?
The church is important, the mosque is important, the market area is important. So we use those areas that you will find women predominantly as a means of spreading our message. For the rural areas, those who came down to Monrovia to buy goods
Yes.
went back and said, we saw something amazing, group of women protesting, why don't we start? The beauty of their work was that they never started any protest in their communities without getting me and the rest of the women from the city to go and validate their work.
Let me ask you something. And there's a serious answer to this question, I know. It's all women. What about the men? Did you ever think of enlisting men?
We never really thought about it.
We know the power of women.
We deliberately said, and for many reasons, Liberia was a police state at the time.
Mr. Doc was the president.
Taylor was taking no mess from anyone.
Yes.
There was a ban on public protests. There was a ban on a lot of things. And we decided when we started the protest that if we included men, the next thing they would say is subversive activity. That
Right.
These men had guns, that these men... But if we came without shoes, in those tattered T-shirts with our hair ties, they would take us to be nothing. And truly, some of his closest aides said to us, the first time they saw us, some of them said, these are nothing but toothless bulldogs. They can't do anything, so let's just leave them. They will get hungry, they will get tired, they will go back home. So as we continue our protest, the toothless bulldogs gained the recognition and they realized that we were a force to reckon with. But we deliberately said to the men and the boys who came to us, some came to us and said, we want to join your protest. And we said, no, this is a women's only thing. If you have any support to give to us, if someone came to you to recruit you to join the war, don't get involved. That is the support
Very
we want.
dramatic moment in this very, very exciting book. I really do urge you to read it. It's an extraordinary book. There's an amazing moment when a man kind of unkempt and comes for food to you, to your family, and you give him some rice, and the militia or whatever it was comes along, and they say, rice, that's the sign of access to rebels, and they shot him. Amazing kind of risk, so I see why you didn't want men to be exposed to that danger.
There were many things happening to the men in the society. You know, now we have a 30% bill in front of Parliament for affirmative action in the Constitution for women.
30% of the positions have to be for women. What is the 30%?
We're looking for 30% in our Constitution for women in politics, so making it mandatory. And the men are resisting.
30%.
And sometimes we say when they're resisting, they have many, many excuses that you've done so well, you need 100, and you need to get it on your merit. And then we look at these men and say, wow, isn't it ironical? 15, 16 years ago, they were under the beds. And we were fighting for peace.
Yeah.
Today, they have the political power,
Yeah.
and they are giving us, you need to merit it. Did you merit the peace that you are now enjoying?
That's a good point, isn't it? How did you get everybody to go to a conference in Ghana, the different sides?
Well, they were resisting at first, and when we started our protest, we wanted 3 things. And I think that was one of the, for those who are doing peace building, when I went to, after we did the protest, went to do my graduate studies in peace building, every time the professor talked about strategic peace building and gave an example, I would be like, we did that. But I didn't know it was strategic peace building. You know, when they talk about conflict analysis and chatting and evaluating conflict, I'll be like, we did that. But I didn't know this was as important as the textbook is making it to sound. You know, so when we started this work, we went into it, basic survival strategy. 3 things: immediate unconditional ceasefire, peace talks, and the deployment of an intervention force. Those were the 3 things that Taylor had made it loud about that he would not accept. Liberia was a sovereign nation. There would be no foreign troops on the ground of Liberia. He was the duly elected president. There would be no discussion with rebels. Those were the things. And then he said, I have the firepower. I will fight till the last soldier die. So we were, in essence, coming back to him saying, these 3 things that you say you won't do are these 3 things that we're asking you to do. And we will protest until you do these 3 things. Finally, we got him when we went to meet him that day. He stood up and promised that he would go to the peace talk, but that we should meet with the rebels. We sent women to where we knew the rebels were, extracted a promise from them. When the dates were set, we decided if we stayed in Monrovia and let them do their own thing, the talks will go on without an end. So we'll mobilize women to protest as the talks were going on and to continue protesting in Liberia. So we went to Ghana, mobilized refugee women, got together, and for the 3+ months of the peace talks, we were protesting every day.
I like this. Is the story in the book where the former president of Nigeria, Jenny Abubakar, who was overseeing the talks, came in and said, "Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the peace hall has been seized by General Leymah and her troops." General Leymah's troops. That's amazing. It's very interesting. That was a key moment, wasn't it?
That was a defining moment for us. We had been to peace talks from June 4th, and that was towards the end of July. Nothing was happening. A ceasefire has broken down. No one was paying attention to anything. The death and destruction in Monrovia continued. So this morning we decided we're going to seize the hall. So we brought more women, told them to lock arms at the front of the door. What we didn't do was to tell them to stand at the window. So when we locked arms at the door, I sent my hostage message in to the mediator because I had sat down, I wrote a very nice hostage message, you know, like you see in the movie. No one is coming outside. I think the only thing that didn't accompany that moment was the drums. But no one is coming outside. No one will be allowed food. The foreigners will be allowed to leave the room, but the Liberians will stay. We're locking you in so that you feel what our people are feeling in Monrovia. General Abubakar read the statement, and then he goes, "Oh my God, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, General Leymah and her troops have seized the hall." The police heard it, and they decided they were going to arrest me. "Why are you arresting me?" They said they were arresting me for obstructing justice. I was only working for justice.
Yes.
Everything I've been doing for the last 6 months to 9 months was for justice.
Right.
And you are arresting me for obstructing justice? Justice had a different meaning for me. For me, justice had no face. Everything that had been socialized to believe that the word is a perfect place, the word will protect women and children, that was my socialization. If you read this book, from my early years, that was what I was taught to believe. There was no difference between Christians and Muslims. There was no difference between white and black. There was no difference between the diverse ethnicities that we live between. At that moment, everything collapsed. Every shred of integrity that I felt I had was being taken away by these men in uniform. In my anger, in my protest, I said, it's okay. I'll make it easy for you. When I go to prison, I have to wear prison dress. I'll strip naked now. So that when I
Wait
get
a minute.
there...
You said you're going to strip naked?
Strip naked. So I took off my hair tie. When I loosed my wrap, one guy came running and put it back on me. I wasn't there. It was all like for me, but I was just really angry.
Now, this, in your society, in your culture, was the most outrageous thing that could be done.
It's like a curse. So I'm saying to these security men, okay, I'm going to just let out this curse. My protest of pain as a mother, my protest of pain as a woman, and they all fled.
Hey, I say,
In 5 minutes, all of the people who were arresting me came back and said, send women to the windows because the men are jumping out of the windows. So we had to send women to barricade the windows.
I don't recommend it for any rebelling Columbia students. You need to be as tough as Leymah to get away with that. So the conference ended in a success, really.
A peace agreement. I won't call it a success, but a peace agreement was signed. We went back to Monrovia and we sat down after all of the celebrations and asked ourselves, what do we do now? When we were in Accra, we were asking the mediators to set benchmarks. You have this very bulky document. How do we know when it's been a success? How do we know when you are really achieving what you set out to achieve? No one paid attention, so we took the peace agreement. 80 of us went into a room, sat down for 3 days. We set our own benchmarks, simplified the agreement, sent for women leaders and said to them, go back into your communities. January to December, this should be happening. March to April, this should be happening. If you don't see it happen, protest. These women went back into their communities, and this is how they knew. Then we also knew all of the different events that would lead to elections: disarmament, civic education, voters registration. We called the international community. Can we get involved? The first thing we heard, we were bringing experts from Bosnia and Kosovo to help disarm the boys. The day of disarmament, even though we had been told no, we went there. We took some boys to be disarmed. And what we observed, and this is something that I always use as an example to people going through a particular conflict or going through a particular situation, no one can solve your issue for you better than yourself. You know, a lot of you in Colombia, here in the US, a lot of the students here, I want to go to Africa, I want to go to the other parts of the world to do some good. If you go with that attitude that I'm the Superman, I'm carrying the answers, you fail miserably. And then you come back and write a book just to appease your ego, but it won't be a success. So we go and we disarm, but as we're standing there, this is one of the fundamental mistakes. That's what we say, it's always good to use local knowledge. This young lady is sitting there and she's processing a fighter. Ask this little boy, where did you fight? He says, southeastern Liberia. Who did you fight with? Lurd.
That's one of the armies.
And she processed him. We went to her and said, you just processed that young man. She said, yes. You know, all this air of an expat. So call him back. We brought him back. Where did you fight? Southeast. Who did you fight with? Lurd. And then we say, you better talk the truth because we will whip your butt so hard. Because first, Lurd was in the north.
Right.
Model was in the southeast. So you never, and then he goes, yes, my brother gave me this gun so that I could get the $300. Before disarmament, the UN estimated 30,000 child soldiers. After disarmament, they processed 90,000 child soldiers.
Amazing. Just one thing which is pretty famous, actually. Can you just describe, and then I want to get some questions from the audience for the laureate. Femininity, being women. There's something called the catwalk. You did something which I'm not quite sure about. Tell us about the catwalk.
You know, if I didn't have this early morning title as a Nobel laureate, I would have done the catwalk for you. But now,
show you,
my whole world has turned upside down. I just asked a journalist, will I be allowed to buy street food when I'm in Ghana? And he said, I think so. I said, will I be allowed to jump around like a monkey, like way I like to jump around? He said, maybe. I said, well, but what we do being women in most of our trainings, by the time we enter a community to work with women, we want to reaffirm their womanhood. A lot of the times, women who have been through conflict and crisis, a huge feature of that is the low self-esteem, low self-worth, because people have done so many things to them. I went through the same experience. So we talk about being woman, ask questions, simple questions like, what are your crowns? What are your thorns? And then most times, regardless of how educated or how uneducated a particular group of women are, we realize that in our part of the world, no one reaffirms your beauty. You don't take our time to look at yourself to say anything. So before we start any training, we do the catwalk. And as you do go up and down like any supermodel would do regardless of your shape and size, you can say, I like this part of my body, I like that part, I like this thing about me. And I've actually heard even government ministers, women ministers who work in different countries, go through the process, sit down and say, wow, this feels real good. So we do that as a means of just reaffirming yourself. And I do it all of the time. Every morning I wake up, I dress up, I look in the mirror and say, girl, you look good.
You do. And you do. And you do. Questions now. Questions from the audience. We've got a microphone. Don't be scared. She won't eat you, Just bite you. Questions for Leymah. Don't tell me there's not a single question from this brilliant crowd of intellects. Yes, there's one over there.
Don't get them started, sir.
Diane Keefe, class of '84 from Green Festivals. And I wonder two questions. One is, why do you think they didn't kill you? Because I know that there were many people that were massacred during the Civil War. And the second is, what would your advice be to the current social activists in the United States who want to see change in our country, especially the Occupy Wall Street folks and the people who are working in social enterprise and nonprofits to make change? Thanks.
Thank you.
Did you hear that?
Why they didn't kill me? I think they've killed so many people. I was just not one of those. But I also think that my faith is that God had me for such a time as this. When we started our protests, I personally didn't have any more fear in me. The first time I saw a dead body at 17, I froze. If all hell broke loose in this room right now, I would be the only one trying to calm everyone. That's how traumatized I am. When you're able to function in chaos, you are not normal. It's for real. And that is a key feature of many people who have lived through prolonged conflict. I can't answer why I wasn't killed. I don't ever feel like I was threatened. And if anyone was planning anything, I didn't give them a second thought. I woke up every morning, I had a purpose. Like now, I wake up every morning, I have a purpose. Women's rights, peace, security, young girls' empowerment, those things are my focus, and I'm just moving towards them. And all through it, I'm saying, Jesus, Jesus, give me the strength. That's the first part. Occupy Wall Street. I spoke earlier about a key factor of the work that we did. We had an agenda. If you're doing a protest, you need to have an agenda. If you woke up in the morning and took a guitar on downtown Manhattan and took a drum downtown Manhattan, and someone is singing, another one is dancing, and some people are, and movie stars are coming and saying, do this, do that, do the other, and everyone is confused, you will be there for a long time, and everyone will take you for a joke.
Great advice.
The uprising is a good sign that people are no longer sitting back and taking crap from anyone. But those who are doing the protests need to come together now and say, these are the reasons why we are occupying Wall Street, and we will not leave until this, and if we cannot get this, we will take it to another level. There has to be some plan.
That's brilliant. Brilliant advice. Next question.
Hello.
Where are you? Over there.
Over
Okay.
here. We have a lineup of us. I was just wanting to ask you a question on one of the comments you made earlier about how now you're moving for women's representation in Parliament. And I was just wondering, I know that Rwanda originally had a requirement where they had 30% of their parliament was required to be women, and now they have over 50% of their parliament, which is women, without upping that requirement. So they're actually a leader in the world, and definitely something that all of us can learn from. Furthermore, they've been putting a lot of women into power positions in military and police forces, and also integrating them into positions throughout those sectors. And with the idea that this is going to increase peace within the country, because the mothers of Rwandans will think differently about how they deploy security. I'm wondering if you think there's any lessons that Liberia can draw upon, and any best practices which you think are possible for the rest of the world as well.
You get that?
Yeah. Last September, we brought together a group of women's rights activists, political leaders, women we felt in Africa that have been trailblazers to really show us how they did it, how we can do it. And we really got a two-sided coin to the whole issue of affirmative action and quota. We got Dr. Maria Matembe from Uganda. She's a powerful women's rights fighter. And she said to us, it's a very good thing. But the question you need to ask yourself now is, what caliber of women are you putting into those parliaments? Are they just puppets for the different presidents? When they say run, you run, stand, you stand, sing, you sing? Or do you want the caliber of women who will go in there and fight tooth and nails to get what they want? That was a crucial question, because then she asked us, take a look at all of these countries. Rwanda, huge success. But no one has done a study, in my opinion, to check how 52% in parliament has translated into a better off life for women in the grassroots. Since I'm in Colombia, someone needs to do that study.
Okay. Yes.
No one has done how the increased number of women in the security sector has changed the perception of women in the sector. So we need to start to look at all of these things. So by the time they got through, the Sierra Leoneans who were at that meeting started making frantic calls back to Sierra Leone, we need to put this in our bill. The Liberians were like, we need to review our bill. Because, again, we want more women. But we want women who will really be serious about the issues of women. When someone stand up in parliament and say a girl is raped because of the clothes she wears, that's a serious problem. That's one. Two, take a look at Rwanda and look at the close proximity of Rwanda to DR Congo. What acts have the women in the Rwandan parliament passed? Maybe they've done so. What statement, loud statement have they made on behalf of the women of Congo? These are things we need to look at. These are things we need to talk about, even as we advocate for. I am advocating for more women, but it's not just quantity, quality.
Exactly.
Hi, my name is Shamik Bose.
Time for one more question. Where is it?
There.
Hi, my name is Shamik Bose. I'm a student
Okay,
here.
right.
Thank you so much. I'm really humbled and honored to be able to ask you this question. You know, as a future entrepreneur, social entrepreneur, I think I'm very fearful of how I can accomplish that. And my job as a social entrepreneur is to teach people how to be fearless, to embrace social change. So being in the best training ground for 14 years, learning how to overcome fear, can you tell us how we can do that?
I don't think anyone can teach anyone to overcome fear. You have to be burned several times in order to, you have to be fearful to appreciate fear. And you have to live through fear to overcome fear. If you've never been scared or if you've never been to a horror movie, how do you know how horrifying the movie is? And how do you know how to check your emotions? I think, and coming back to your question, there's no way, like I said, no way anyone can teach anyone anything.
But didn't spirituality help you? Jesus, how much does religion help you?
You know, Jesus was taught to me when I was a child. And when the war came, and because if you read the beginning of my book, it talks about prayers being answered all throughout my life. When the war came, I was praying for it to end. And because I had come to that place where I understood the God that I knew to be a prayer answering God, I kept saying it would end tomorrow. And when tomorrow did not come, I got angry. No one could get me to pray. No one could get me to do anything, so I lost my way. My faith I lost. And it took, in a refugee camp, a friend sitting with me, and I was very angry as this person tried to read the Bible and talk to me again about Christ and the church and his saving powers. But gradually it sunk in. Gradually it came back. But it was not all of the time. There were times that I lost my way. And having found my way back to him, I believe that, yes, he was one of the major factors in helping me travel this journey that I've journeyed so far. But to come back to his question, in terms of overcoming fear, the one question you want to ask people as they get involved in a particular venture, what it is that you stand to lose. What have you lost so far? What do you stand to gain? You know, once you can answer all of those questions, in Liberia we lost everything. There was nothing to lose anymore. So the only thing we could do is to get involved in a fight. And someone asked me, how do you live through terror? You don't live through terror. You survive through terror. If you woke up in the morning and found a buck, you ate it. When you're living, you can decide, I want ham and cheese this morning. That's living. When you're surviving, if you see a green grass, you chew it to survive. So you need to, when you're working with people, I think you need to ask them, take stock. Where are you? What do you intend to get involved in? What will you lose if you don't get involved? What will you gain if you get involved? Are you prepared to take the risks if you compare the two? I think that for me is the best way. But for us, we didn't have any choice. We lived with fear, we overcame fear, and we confronted fear.
Yeah. That we must close on that. I want just to say one thing. First of all, the mayor's now, the book is, I really do commend it. It's a very exciting and rewarding book, and you're doing a lot of work now to end violence generally through your trust. And I want to first thank Columbia and the two co-chairs of this event, who must have something going for them when the day they invite, she becomes a Nobel laureate. So let's respond to this great honor that she's bestowed on us.